Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive puzzle, one of the absolute most baffling, unresolved aviation mysteries in history. I mean, think about it. Long before we had modern flight tracking, GPS, or satellite communication, the skies were a much more mysterious place. So we're traveling all the way back to 1962 to investigate a case that has literally stumped experts for decades. It's a pretty stark reminder of the human cost of government secrecy.
So let's just dive right into the deep end here. We have to ask the central question that has haunted investigators and true crime historians for well over 60 years now. How on earth do 107 highly trained military personnel just vanish into thin air over the Pacific, leaving absolutely zero trace behind? How does a massive aircraft packed with people literally cease to exist? No distress calls, no wreckage, no answers.
Part 1. A Cold War Mystery.
Okay, to really set the scene here, you gotta remember the world in 1962 was intensely divided. We are right at the absolute peak of the Cold War. Global tension is sky high and extreme secrecy, well, that was just standard operating procedure for the US military back then. Now, on March 14th, a highly secretive charter flight takes off from California. On board are 107 military commandos heading for Vietnam, and they're led by a very experienced 48-year-old pilot, Captain Gregory P. Thomas. Their goal was a classified mission to train South Vietnamese troops in guerrilla warfare. So right off the bat, you know these aren't your average passengers, right? These were highly trained military officials on a very sensitive, high-stakes journey.
And the aircraft they used for this mission? An absolute beast of a machine. The Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation. It was powerful. It was complex. Operating as Flying Tiger Line Flight 739, this massive plane needed a very carefully planned route, with multiple refueling stops just to safely make it across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean.
Part 2. The Troubled Journey.
Now, as you'll see, from the very beginning, this journey was anything but routine. Actually, scratch that. It was plagued by bizarre, repetitive mechanical issues that almost felt like a giant red flag. Let's map it out chronologically. The plane leaves California and almost immediately hits a snag: ignition failures in engines 1 and 3 over the ocean. Thankfully, they managed to land safely in Honolulu, Hawaii. Engineers get to work fixing the engines and load up some sleeping mattresses for the crew. They take off again, but get this. On the way to Wake Island, those exact same engines fail again? It's like the plane itself is refusing to fly. Still, they push through, land at Wake Island, get another fix, and finally make it safely to Andersen Air Base in Guam for the night.
And here is where things get really interesting. During this nighttime stop in Guam, the passengers and crew step off the plane to eat and rest up, and the aircraft gets refueled. But for exactly 15 minutes, this highly secretive military-chartered plane was left completely empty and completely unattended on a pitch-black tarmac. No guards, no crew, just a massive, vulnerable plane sitting alone in the shadows of a military base. You'll definitely want to keep that detail in the back of your mind.
Part 3. Vanishing into Thin Air.
All right, so the crew and passengers eventually come back from their break. It's late, the weather is calm, and they take off around 11 p.m. local time. They're loaded up with 9.5 hours of fuel for what is supposed to be a pretty standard 6-hour flight to the Philippines. About 80 minutes into the flight, the pilots make a totally routine request to bump their altitude up to 18,000 feet. Just 3 minutes after that, air traffic control lets them know they're leaving radar range, which, was completely standard for ocean crossings back in those days. Then, right at the 123-minute mark, Captain Thomas makes a normal radio check. He reports their position about 520 kilometers west of Guam. His voice is calm, there's no panic, absolutely no mention of engine trouble, and then, complete and total silence. They were literally never heard from again. So what happened? Well, 1 hour and 16 minutes after that last normal contact, 5 crew members on a civilian tanker ship called the SS Lawson, which was about 17 miles away from the plane's projected path, reported this absolutely terrifying sight in the night sky. They said they watched a vapor trail move across the horizon, and then a massive, blinding explosion. They said the blast was so incredibly bright it lit up the entire deck of their ship, and then they watched 2 distinct fireballs just plummet straight into the dark ocean below.
Of course, the captain of the SS Lanson immediately changed course. Using a star to navigate toward the exact spot those fireballs fell, the ship rushed over there. They spent 5.5 hours scouring the water with high-powered spotlights. But here's the crazy part. The ocean was completely clean. No luggage, no metal debris, no floating fuel oil, and tragically, no survivors. It was as if this explosion had just swallowed a massive super constellation whole.
Part 4. The Pacific Search Operation. Meanwhile, back on land, the alarms are ringing. When Flight 739 didn't show up at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, it triggered the single largest search operation in Pacific history. And when I say massive, I mean totally unprecedented. For 8 grueling days, this huge armada of ships, helicopters, and thousands of personnel scoured an astonishing 520,000 square kilometers of the Pacific Ocean. To put that into perspective for you, that is an area roughly the size of the entire country of Thailand. And despite all that manpower, all that technology, they found absolutely nothing.
Part 5. 4 Theories of Flight 739.
With the search officially called off, investigators were left staring at a massive, terrifying puzzle. I mean, how does a super constellation just vanish? This complete void of evidence led to 4 prevailing theories that we really need to break down. First up is the sabotage theory. And honestly, this one is fueled by a genuinely shocking coincidence. Get this. On the exact same day Flight 739 vanished, another identical, top-secret Flying Tiger plane took off from California on a military charter. That first plane, it crashed into the snowy mountains of Alaska. Hours later, Flight 739 meets its disastrous fate over the Pacific. 2 identical planes, same company, same day, both unclassified military missions. Was this some sort of orchestrated double sabotage that started on the ground in California?
Next, investigators looked into natural disasters and external attacks. Could it have been a lightning strike? History tells us lightning has definitely taken down planes before. But they quickly ruled this out because the SS Lanson crew reported crystal clear skies with 0 storm activity. Okay, what about a Cold War missile strike? Also ruled out. If a missile hit a plane of that sheer size, it would shatter into thousands of pieces, right? It would leave miles of floating wreckage and fuel for that nearby ship to find. But remember, the ocean was absolutely spotless.
So, it brings investigators right back to that crucial 15-minute window in Guam. For many people, this remains the most plausible working theory. Security on that dark tarmac was incredibly loose. In those 15 unattended minutes, anyone could have walked up to that unguarded aircraft and planted an explosive device on a timer. It perfectly explains a sudden mid-air explosion with no distress call. But again, without a single piece of wreckage, there was never any definitive physical proof recovered to actually confirm a bomb.
And finally, we have the covert operation theory. This is the idea that, hey, since this was a top-secret Cold War mission, maybe the explosion the ship saw was actually faked, like a giant flare or a staged distraction. This would theoretically allow the plane to fly off the radar deeper into enemy territory for some highly classified objective. But there's a major, heartbreaking flaw with this theory. It completely fails to explain why, in the 60-plus years since, not a single one of the 107 families ever heard from their loved ones again.
Part 6. An Unsolved Secret.
Exactly a year after the disappearance, the government officially closed the investigation, just vaguely citing an explosion of unknown origin. The book was essentially shut, leaving families and historians with absolutely no closure. In all these decades, the only haunting piece of potential evidence ever found floating in the ocean was a sleeping mattress. It was discovered roughly 40 miles away from the reported explosion site. Remember those mattresses the engineers loaded onto the plane back during that first stop in Honolulu? It's a really chilling connection, though sadly the military never officially confirmed if this mattress actually belonged to Flight 739.
Which leaves us with this final thought-provoking question to end our explainer today. The official files regarding Flight 739 are still completely classified, locked away from the public well over 60 years later. We really have to ask ourselves, are they just protecting military secrets from a bygone era? Or are they shielding the truth of a tragic mistake? What secrets are still buried at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean? Thank you so much for exploring this mystery with me today, and keep questioning the unknown.